beauties, Shaz here, and today I'm going to talk about 15 eyeshadow palettes that I found in my collection that I cannot wait to use this fall. If you want to find out which palettes these are, give a thumbs up and let's jump in. I make a version of this video every fall season, and I'm going to tag those videos from the past in the comments below. Obviously, those palettes, if you have them, would still be very fall appropriate. I have mentioned in those videos that there is usually two things that I consider as fall appropriate palettes. Either they have very much of what we consider a fall color story, which usually is fall foliage, or they are in the genre of spooky Halloweeny, which is a little bit more grungy. This fall, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to include a lot more color in my fall looks. So the palettes we're going to talk about, we've never talked about before, although they might not necessarily be recent releases. As I'm talking about these palettes, I'll put some photos that I got inspired by on the screen. Let's get started. Our first palette is RKO from Cleona. Seasonal palette for autumn is supposed to be warm toned, and blue is naturally a very cool toned shade. But I'm actually very interested in the blues because we do see in a lot of states in the fall foliage blues and pinks. And I love the fact that we have some pinks here, separate from having some of what we consider traditional fall foliage shades. Our next palette is Prom Night from Crash Cosmetics. And you can see that there is a lot of fall foliage shades, these neutrals and some green in this palette. And I love getting out of that comfort zone and giving us a lot of pinks and burgundies. In a lot of northern states in the US, pink is the color of fall foliage. So I love incorporating it into my fall looks this year. And on the same note, I want to pull out Muse palette from Cosmic Brushes. Again, we have all the greens, the orange, and these neutrally fall shades, but then we have a lot of pinks. Nomad Royal Europe is another one that I want to pull out this year. Again, we have the same theme, a lot of neutrally shades, but then you have teals. We have seen teal shades in the color of the leaves, and then pinks and burgundies. And beauties, if you watched my last video, you know what palettes I used to make this eyeshadow, because those are also palettes that I can't wait to use. One of them is the original Baddie Bean and Shroud palette, and the next one is the second Baddie Bean and Shroud palette. Of course, both of these palettes have the more grungy fall effect. Now this one is maybe a little bit more on the foliage side, but I can't wait to use these to make more looks this year. Beauties, stay till the end for me to tell you a palette that I think you can use in multiple seasons, that has a very versatile color story. It's a great price and it has a good bit of shade diversity. Let's talk about two palettes from ColourPop. One on the fall side, one on the grunge side. Now, maybe I've mentioned one of these palettes in a video before, but this is my favorite palette of all times. Good Sport from ColourPop. ColourPop, you need to do more palettes like this. We have that fall foliage shade, even including some pinks and purple colors. And then the next one, of course, has to go to my Nightmare Before Christmas palette from ColourPop, which is more on the grungy spooky, but I love the pinks and the flashy orange shade up here. I would totally make very grungy and beautiful fall looks with this. Now that we're talking about grungy palettes, let's talk about another grungy one, which might not remind you of the fall, but it's a lovely palette and ideal for this time of the year. I'm talking about no other than Rogue from Fantasy Cosmetica. I have a video doing looks with this palette in this channel, and I consider all of those looks pretty appropriate for the fall. You can definitely use these shades to get that grungy fall Halloween-y vibes. Don't sleep on it. And beauties, unfortunately, some of these palettes might not be available anymore, but in this channel, we focus on using what we already have. Or if you don't have some of these, you can always dupe them like I do. And the next one I want to talk about is Dark Fantasy from Beauty Bay, which is one of my absolute favorite grungy spooky palette. And this is definitely a palette that I'm going to put on my desk to use more this year. And I have done a review with looks using this palette in this channel, and now I can't wait to bring it out and use it more. If you want to see me do looks with any of these palettes, write it in the comments below. And now that we talked about some grungy palettes, let's go back and talk about some palettes that have a fall season color story. One of them is Peacock Feathers from Mika Beauty Shop. I'm not going to say a whole lot. You can already see the fall foliage stories here, and we see some purples and blues, which I absolutely love to incorporate in my looks this year. And while Peacock Feathers is still available from Mika Beauty Shop if you want it, Adept's inspired palette is no longer available, but it also has a super fall appropriate color story with all the greens that have a shift of gold or brown or neutral, and then incorporating some pinks and blues. This is exactly the type of color story that I want to see and use this year. So if you have this, don't forget to bring it out. The next palette that I want to use more this year is Ambiance from Ace Beauté, that has a super fall color story. You have all the grungy, beautiful mattes, and Ace Beauté has great matte quality. So I can't wait to jump back into this. And all of those foliage shades. You definitely have some purples. I totally love that. Then you have this plum burgundy row. I remember making some looks with this palette in my Instagram channel last year. I did 30 days of fall makeup looks during the month of October. In fact, I've made some looks with a lot of these palettes. You should check out my Instagram for some eye look inspirations. Link to my Instagram is in the comments below. From Miami to Bahamas from Cara Beauty is another palette that is a total fall color story. I also love that they incorporated some blues in here. As I mentioned, fall color season is usually warm, but I love to also incorporate some cool tones like blues and pinks into my looks this year. And last but not least is Culture 2 from Juvia's Place. These two rows definitely scream fall color stories because they're variations of greens and yellows, reminding us of fall foliage. But then you have some oranges in other rows, and pinks and blues and burgundies, which are shades that I told you I want to use more this year. Because this palette has so many shades in it, and also it's a very decent price, and you can get it from Ulta. You can probably apply some discount to it over that, even if you have coupons. This is a great palette to own and use in other seasons as well. You can find the review and the looks that I do with it in the descriptions below. Now it's your turn to tell me what palettes you can't wait to use more this fall season. As I said, I do this seasonal palettes every year, and if you enjoyed this video, the playlist is going to be recommended to you at the end of this video if you want to watch more. I love you all. Have an amazing day, and until next time, bye.